No intro needed, let's get straight into it. Number one, podcasting is a growing trend. Year on year, we're seeing more and more people releasing podcasts, more and more podcast episodes for people to listen to. Now, before I started my first podcast, I was convinced that the number of podcasts that were out there had peaked and that it wasn't going to be growing anymore. How wrong I was, and that was just a couple of years ago. Not only that, and more importantly, the trend is continuing to grow. There are more and more podcasts that are being created right now, and that is set to continue. Number two, your smartphone is the easiest way to get going by using the microphone in here as your podcast microphone. Before I started my first podcast, I thought you needed to have the most expensive kind of microphone, fancy headphones, a boom arm that comes out over your desk, makes you look like a pro, and also a pop filter, one of those things that goes between the microphone and your mouth when you're speaking. But actually, you don't need any of those things at all. All that you need is a decent kind of microphone, and these are available on your smartphone. So long as your phone isn't like 10 years old or anything like that, then the microphones in here, which are designed to be used for phone calls, are also excellent for recording an audio podcast. Number three, variety is crucial. If you have a podcast and every single episode is exactly the same format, say you speaking to one guest on each episode, then your audience is going to start to get just a little bit bored of that. So instead, change it up from episode to episode. Maybe one episode have one person, the next episode have 5 people on there. The next episode is a solo episode where it's just you recording on your own. Maybe an episode you go to a conference or a convention where a lot of your target audience is going to be. Maybe go and speak to some of your target audience and actually record a podcast while you're there at the convention. The most important thing really is as much variety as possible. It just means that your audience will carry on listening from one episode to the next. Number four, duration is really, really important. There's no golden nugget that says this is the perfect length for a podcast, but you've got to think about your target market. So if your podcast is aimed at parents that are dropping their children off and they've got a 10-minute window to listen to something on their way back home, then a podcast episode that's 2.5 hours long is not going to cut it. They're not going to listen to that for 10 minutes and then listen to the other 2 hours, 20 minutes another time. They're simply not going to start listening to that. So for that market, a podcast episode that's around about 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes long is going to be perfect. But if your audience are the kind of people that are going to sit down and deep dive into your content, then an episode that's 1.5 hours, 2 hours, 2.5 hours long is going to be absolutely fine because they'll carry on listening the whole way through. Maybe if they're going to the gym, they're doing a 10K, they're training for a marathon, that kind of thing, they will carry on listening to that podcast episode because they're able to. So there's no magic number for what is the perfect duration. It just depends on your market. Number five, for most podcast episodes, editing is required. Sure, you might think that it's okay just to rock up with a friend of yours to hit record and then to carry on talking, and that your audience will be interested in it. But you'd be amazed how many ums, ers, hesitations and pauses, any kind of crosstalk, that awkwardness where somebody thinks the question has been finished answering and they step in to ask another question, then you do that British thing of apologising too much. If you edit out all of that, it just makes a much nicer listening experience for your audience. Number six, coming from a quiet little side street. And actually, if you're watching this video and if you're enjoying it, then do me a massive favor and smash that like button. It costs absolutely nothing to do it. It makes a massive difference to us. Anyway, let's crack on with it. Bad audio from one person means bad audio for the entire podcast episode. If you have 5 or 6 guests on and all of them have good audio quality, apart from one person who's maybe using a microphone on a really old laptop from 10 years ago, then the quality of that one person is going to make it bad for everybody because you're going to hear that bad quality, that hiss in the background, that photocopier that's going off, that air conditioning unit, you're going to hear that throughout the entire episode. Now sure, you do have the option to mute that person when they're not speaking. However, when they do speak and you bring them back in, it sort of raises the awareness that that bad audio is there in the first place. So really take a little bit of extra time, just a few seconds, a couple of minutes, to make sure that those windows are closed, that the air conditioning is turned off, that you're optimizing the quality of each person's audio coming through. There's a nice little bell going off there. We're about to come on to number 7, but it's quite interesting when you're recording a video like this and changing different location, getting that variety because that's important, then you find some lovely little spots all around London like this. Anyway, number 7, consistency is really, really important. When you're recording podcast episodes and they're always coming out on, say, a Sunday evening, your audience gets to expect and to anticipate those episodes coming out. And if all of a sudden you don't do it and you have a 3-month break or a 6-month break, they start to lose interest. And that's the quickest way to lose your subscribers or your followers. So keep it consistent. Always have them coming out on a regular basis. Even if you get a whole load of episodes that are stored up in advance in the buffer because you've got them all recorded and edited, then eke them out slowly according to your expected time schedule. Number 8, your podcast artwork is crucial. People always say things like, never judge a book by its cover, but it's complete rubbish because that's exactly what we always do. You could have the best content in the world, but if your podcast artwork is no good, then it's pointless having that good content because no one's going to come along and check it out. Pay a designer to do it professionally for you. It will take your podcast much further. Number 9, you can have a podcast on pretty much anything these days. Some of our American friends might say the riches are in the niches, but of course we're in the UK, we say niches. I couldn't actually think of anything that rhymes with niches, apart from quiches, and that doesn't really work. Although, a little French quiche from a boulangerie. So what do we mean by niching it down? Well, you could have a podcast, for example, on learning difficulties, but then within learning difficulties, you could have a podcast on, say, dyslexia. But then within dyslexia, you could have a podcast that's aimed at working mums who've got dyslexia, or they're working with other people who are dyslexic. Therefore, now you're combining learning difficulties and dyslexia and being a mum all at the same time by niching it down. If you niche it down, then you'll find more people to connect with who really, really want to connect with you because you're talking exactly their language. And number 10, it is perfectly normal to be a little bit nervous before you start your podcast. But one thing I will say is that you won't get over that fear of starting unless you actually start it. You can sit around and try and think your way out of it. You can watch YouTube videos on how to be more confident on your podcast. But actually the best way to start it is to just go ahead and do it. And after you've recorded your first few interviews, after your first episodes are under your belt, you'll feel much more comfortable about recording subsequent episodes. That's it for this video. Thanks very much for watching. Please like and comment on this video and even consider subscribing. Bye for now. That was a noisy bike, wasn't it?